Have you finished packing? Please hurry up. We're planning to renovate your room after you leave. The eldest son's wife, with a mix of impatience and excitement, urged us on. She seemed thrilled about finally making the house her own. It was clear she didn't know the half of it. I glanced at my husband, who silently signaled me to hold back, then offered a gentle smile to his brother's wife. Sorry for the delay. We'll be out by tomorrow. Since there will be workers around, it's best if you and Emily stay in your room. We're leaving behind the shared furniture and appliances. Our things are mostly just bedding and a few dressers. It shouldn't take more than 30 minutes to move everything out. The next day, the farewell was quicker than I expected. Well, we're off then. Yeah, see you. Take care, they replied without much thought or emotion. There were no apologies or thanks, no proper send-off. The eldest son and his wife simply lounged in the living room, barely acknowledging our departure. With their indifference, there was no need for us to be overly courteous either. As we silently climbed into the taxi, I couldn't help but worry about the cat we were leaving behind. Would Emily care for it properly? Would she give it the love and attention it needed? Watching our home fade into the distance through the taxi window, I suddenly had a thought. I pulled out my phone and made a call. In hindsight, this might have been my sixth call. My name is Karen. I'm 64 years old, and my husband John is a year older than me. We've been happily married for 35 years with no major conflicts. John worked for a multinational company and was usually very busy, but he always made time for the family. This year, John retired, and I was looking forward to spending more quality time together. However, it seemed I was the only one excited about his retirement. Our eldest son Robert and his wife Emily had shown dissatisfaction. They had been living with us for about a year, ever since their marriage. Emily had requested to stay with us because of the convenience of our home being close to the station for commuting and shopping. We wanted to give the newlyweds space, but were ultimately persuaded to let them stay. I never imagined it would lead to this. 2 months after John retired, I returned from shopping to hear John's angry voice from the living room. He was scolding Robert, who was slouched on the sofa. It was rare for my usually calm husband to be so furious. What's going on? I asked. John sighed deeply. Robert was rummaging through my bag and took money from my wallet. What? I was stunned. He's been short on cash after losing big at the Kentucky Derby recently. John grabbed a few bills from Robert's hand. It was definitely John's wallet, one I had given him for our 25th wedding anniversary. The presence of the wallet and the money in Robert's hand was undeniable proof. Robert, I thought you quit gambling. You promised never to do it again after that big loss. Why? Robert didn't reply. He continued watching TV, indifferent to the reprimand. He often ignored conversations that didn't interest him or involve criticism, and it seemed he truly wasn't listening. Despite my pleas, he remained unresponsive. I suspected the reason for his return to gambling was Emily. Robert had never been interested in gambling before. He was an honest office worker, never involved in criminal activities like stealing or shoplifting. So what had drastically changed him? I would undoubtedly say that meeting Emily had a significant impact on Robert. Emily was lively and energetic, and when they were introduced, I hoped she would bring out the best in my introverted son. However, I was unaware of her true nature at that time. I didn't realize she was an avid gambler with a reckless approach to money. Your mother is speaking to you. How about acknowledging her instead of just sitting there? John's frustration was palpable as he turned off the TV. Finally, Robert spoke up. Shut up. I gave it back, so stop whining. Why are you making such a fuss over a couple of bills? I was shocked at his dismissive attitude and the small amount of cash he had taken. Dad, you've really fallen, haven't you? Well, I retired, so that's to be expected, Robert retorted dismissively. Pathetic. With that, he walked out of the living room. I tried to stop him, but John held me back. It's partly my fault for leaving my bag out, John said. Repeatedly scolding him will only make things worse. But his attitude is just too much. It's horrible. John had never flaunted his role as the family's breadwinner, but it was clear that our comfortable lifestyle was largely due to his efforts. This included supporting Robert and Emily, who not only saved on rent but also made excuses for not contributing to living expenses, which John primarily covered. Instead of showing gratitude, they insulted him. I couldn't help but feel anger, not only towards Robert but also towards Emily, who had rekindled his gambling habits. A few days later, the situation still troubled me deeply. I decided it was time to confront Emily. Robert seems to be struggling with money lately. Do you know anything about it? Oh, he lost big at the Kentucky Derby, didn't he? Emily replied casually. You knew about that? I asked, taken aback. Yeah, I invited him to go with me, she admitted. Just as I suspected, Robert had started gambling again because of Emily. Why would you do that? Robert was trying to quit. Was he? I didn't know that, Emily said with a hint of indifference. Please, Emily, don't invite Robert to gamble anymore. If this continues, it will cause problems for you too. We just do what we want with our own earnings, Emily said, shrugging. So it's not a problem. I was taken aback by her unexpected response. It was true that both Robert and Emily earned their own money and had no concerns about basic needs like food, clothing, or shelter, giving them freedom to spend as they please. But you're married. You might have children someday. For your future, you should consider being more responsible with your finances. We've decided not to have kids, Emily responded. We don't want to be tied down or restricted by child-rearing responsibilities. Her response shocked me again. There was so much to process, but in a way, it made sense. Financial needs drastically change with children, and their lax money management reflected that. However, even without children, a couple should support each other. As a couple, you should help each other in tough times. Robert is struggling right now. Why don't you help him out? You're his parents. Besides, you're well off. Oh, but now you're on a pension, right? Emily asked with a hint of mockery. Well, John's company was multinational, so there isn't really a pension, I replied. That's disappointing, Emily said, her tone lacking sympathy. I thought you'd have a substantial pension, I said, surprised. No, there isn't one, Emily replied. So, please handle Robert's issues between yourselves. Honestly, supporting your living expenses is already quite a burden, and we can't afford any more. Well, that's Robert's fault for losing money. You can't blame me for that, she added, shrugging. Anyway, we can't help right now without a clear promise of support for Robert, I said, feeling frustrated as I was practically shown out of their room. A week passed, and Robert's financial troubles remained unresolved. If he was desperate enough to steal from his parents' wallets, wasn't that a sign of real desperation? Shouldn't we help him before he turns to crime? John and I discussed it repeatedly, but he insisted that this was the result of spoiling Robert. Now is the time to be tough for his future, John argued. In the end, I had to agree. At least we were providing meals in the morning and evening, and he had a commuter pass. He just needed to make it to the next payday. But our brief sense of relief was shattered by an unexpected turn of events. It was a weekend night, and after finishing dinner, we were relaxing in the living room when the doorbell rang. Ding dong. It was unusual to have visitors at this hour, so I answered the door with curiosity. To my surprise, Emily stood there, holding a cardboard box in both hands. She struggled to open the door herself. What's this about? What's in the box? I asked, taking the box from her. The rustling sound from inside made me gasp. As I opened the box, I saw a pair of eyes staring back at me. It's a cat, Emily said, looking pleased with herself. Isn't it cute? I found it abandoned on my way home. Despite her enthusiasm, the gravity of the situation hit me. I called out to the living room, John, go to the bedroom, and close the door immediately. I closed the box and handed it back to Emily. Emily, I'm sorry, but we can't keep a cat here. What? Why not? She asked, puzzled. I explained. John has a severe cat allergy. Exposure to cat saliva causes skin inflammation, and inhaling fur or dander triggers asthma-like attacks. Once, when Robert came back from a friend's house covered in cat fur, John had a severe reaction and had to be rushed to the hospital. We discussed this allergy before you moved in. So, you're saying I should just take it back out into the cold? It'll die out there. Emily's response was filled with distress. Her remark left me at a loss for words. I don't dislike cats, so telling her to put the cat back outside was something I couldn't bring myself to do. But I couldn't risk John's health either. All right, the cat can stay in your room for one night, but just one night. Tomorrow, we'll contact the animal shelter to have it taken in. The shelter can provide temporary care for the cat. Emily reluctantly agreed. I informed John and Robert about the arrangement, and we agreed that the cat would stay in their room for the night. However, things didn't go as planned. The next morning, my eldest son and his wife declared, "We've decided to keep the cat." Emily, that's not what we agreed on, I said, feeling frustrated. It's not about whether the cat is cute or not. John is allergic. If he doesn't touch it, it might be fine, but who will take care of it during the day while you're both at work? Can't you take care of it, Karen? Emily asked. I can't, I replied. That's why I'm saying no. Why are you so heartless? Emily shot back. I could only offer a helpless sigh in response. I didn't realize you were so cold, Emily said with a sharp edge in her voice. You can even help a tiny, cute cat. Do you know that shelters often end up euthanizing animals? You're just looking out for yourselves, ignoring any sacrifices needed. People like you are called old nuisances. What? I was taken aback by her harsh words. If we can't keep the cat, you should leave immediately, Emily continued. Before I could respond, Robert chimed in. It might be a good time for you to consider moving to a retirement home. You're old enough, and we have no intention of taking care of you. Besides, you're not earning anymore. That's enough. Both of you, John, who had been silently listening and was now wearing a mask and gloves due to the previous night's incident, suddenly interrupted. He kept his distance from Robert and Emily, and I felt a pang of guilt for making him uncomfortable in his own home. I can't keep a cat because of my allergy, John said. So we'll go along with your suggestion and leave. John, as Robert said, it might be time to consider a retirement home. I agreed, understanding John's intention to avoid further confrontation. To Robert and Emily, it seemed like we had given up. Their attitude shifted to one of triumph. Don't worry about the house, Robert said. We'll take good care of it, but keep all the utilities and ownership in your name. It's too much hassle to change everything. Retirement homes are expensive, Emily added. You'll need to manage that yourself. We're not helping with that. The relief and joy at our compliance were evident. It felt like this had been Emily's plan all along, using the cat as a scheme to force us out. Over the next week, it became clear that their true nature had been revealed. As I prepared for the move, taking care of John's needs and managing the packing, Robert and Emily continued to make snide remarks. They kept the cat in their room, aware that it would be problematic if John fell ill before we left. Have you finished packing? Please hurry up. We're planning to renovate your room after you leave, Emily urged, her tone brimming with impatience. She seemed ecstatic about finally making the house her own. I glanced at John, who silently signaled me to let it go, and smiled gently at Emily. Sorry for the delay. We'll be out by tomorrow. Since there will be workers around, it's best if you and Robert stay in your room. Given that we were leaving behind the shared furniture and appliances, our belongings were mostly just bedding and a few dressers. It probably would have taken more than 30 minutes to move everything out. The next day, the final farewell was more straightforward than I had anticipated. Well, we're off then, I said. See you. Take care. There were no words of apology or gratitude. Without even a proper send-off, Robert and Emily simply glanced at us while lounging in the living room. Given their attitude, there was no need for us to be overly courteous. As we silently got into the taxi, I couldn't help but think about the cat they were leaving behind. Would Emily be able to take care of it properly? Would she provide the love and care it needed? As I watched our home fade into the distance through the taxi window, these thoughts weighed heavily on me. I had a sudden thought and pulled out my phone to call someone. In hindsight, it might have been my 6th call since we moved. Adjusting to life after the move had been a bit unsettling, but it was mostly comfortable. With 2 fewer housemates, everything from cooking to laundry took half the effort, and I no longer had to worry about being considerate. I finally felt like I had regained the freedom I lost before Robert and Emily got married. One night, about a week after settling in, Emily called me, and with John's approval, I answered. Emily's panicked voice blared through the receiver. Karen, what's going on? The power and gas in the house seemed to be off, she exclaimed. It sounded like she had just returned home, and her distress was so great that she inadvertently switched to a video call. All I could see was the beam of a flashlight moving around in a dark room, and I couldn't make out Emily's expression. Well, I canceled the services, so it's no wonder they're off, I replied. What? What do you mean you canceled? Is this some kind of prank? Are you getting back at us for kicking you out? Emily's voice was laced with confusion and anger. Emily, calm down. Is Robert there with you? John asked gently. Emily's tone softened a bit as she replied. He just got home. Robert, seeing the dark house, was also in a mild panic. But after they calmed down, John explained the situation. The house has been sold. The buyer has been found, and the handover date is approaching, so we canceled all the utilities. We were told about this. Emily interjected, her indignation clear. How could you make such arrangements without informing us? I felt exasperated. I informed Robert about everything, the sale, the handover date, and the progress along the way. Clearly, Robert hadn't communicated any of this to you, or perhaps he didn't even remember hearing it. Given all the meetings with real estate agents and potential buyers over the past few months, the house had been quite busy. Robert and Emily were rarely home during the day, so they must have missed all the notifications. They had plenty of chances to notice, but they missed them all. I assumed you would move out right after us. Hadn't you started packing? I asked. I asked innocently, and immediately Robert and Emily began arguing. It's your fault. I didn't know. I was deceived. Watching them bicker in the dark, illuminated only by a flashlight, was oddly amusing. But once their arguments subsided, they directed their anger back at us. Even so, moving forward without your housemate's consent is too much, Emily said, her frustration evident. I don't remember agreeing to this. Oh, but I did get a response from you, I replied. I asked if it was okay to sell the house, and you said, yeah, sure. Robert's response had been half-hearted, delivered while he was engrossed in watching TV, but it was still an answer. It's his fault for not paying attention, I added. Robert, momentarily speechless, then shouted defiantly, fine. What should we do now? What do you mean, what should we do? Where are we supposed to live now? You must have arranged something for us, right? Robert demanded. John replied in a puzzled tone, why would we arrange a place for you? We've already sold the house. You were planning to move out anyway, so we're not to blame. And since you decided to sell the house, you should consider the impact on us. Well, rental properties usually pay relocation fees, Robert argued, so give us some money. You made a lot from the sale, didn't you? A rental house, I retorted. In that case, before paying any relocation fees, you should cover the rent for the time you stayed in the house and the living expenses we've covered for you. Adding it all up, it comes to about $10,000. Can you pay that now? Robert and Emily fell silent. Given Robert's financial troubles, they likely couldn't afford it. Realizing they were at a disadvantage, Robert tried to appease us. Right, we should pay you first, but we're a bit short right now. How about we live together again? Yes, please tell us where you moved. We'll join you there. They hadn't cared about our new place when we left. I dismissed their plea. That's impossible. We can't live with a cat. Wasn't that the reason you kicked us out? We'll get rid of the cat. Just let us stay. Emily pleaded. Their selfishness was evident. It was clear to me that the cat was merely a tool to drive us out. Their words about ignoring sacrifices for comfort were turned back on them. Do you know what? You're right. You called us old nuisances, but it's you who are willing to sacrifice anything for your convenience. Emily was left speechless, tears streaming down her face. John and I no longer felt any obligation to be swayed by her tears. We've moved into a senior living community, as you suggested. It's very comfortable, and we're happy here. We can't have you join us. Don't worry about us. We'll be fine, I said, ending the call. All we heard were their sobs. They never apologized, and soon, Robert and Emily left the house. Without savings, they both declared bankruptcy and now live in public housing. We learned this from Sarah, our friendly neighbor, when we returned to clean the house. According to Sarah, Robert and Emily struggled to pack their belongings in a house without electricity and left the cat behind. Thankfully, Sarah agreed to keep an eye on the cat and ended up adopting it herself. Surprisingly, Robert and Emily didn't divorce. Perhaps they're well matched. They might be hoping for John's inheritance, but since we've chosen a high-cost senior community, there won't be much left. John and I have finally achieved a truly peaceful life together. The community offers many amenities, including a gym, karaoke, and hot springs. We enjoy 3 freshly prepared meals a day and have the freedom to go out or travel as we please. Best of all, we've made many new friends here. We plan to savor this new phase of our lives, cherishing our time and new friendships.